Acceptance is not approval. Just because you accept it doesn't mean you like it. And we say that the origin of crazy is wrestling with what is real when you're living like what is real isn't. And that's the origin of all the turmoil, of all the things that happen. The beginning of all struggle is the misalignment with expectations and reality.
Subtle skills, big results.
Welcome to the Ninja Selling Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Ninja Selling Podcast. I am Rob Nelson, and our guest today is a little bit crazy. So I want everybody to meet and welcome back Mike Staver. Mike Staver is a dear friend of Ninja, of mine, and of many of you. And we feel very fortunate to have Mike here. And I was joking when I called him crazy, but maybe just a little. So Mike Staver is a guy who often helps people navigate the most tumultuous times in their lives. And so frequently, the word crazy comes up when we're going through times of change, times of difficulty. And Mike, I want you to talk a little bit about what is crazy in this context and where you're seeing it. Yeah. Where is crazy appearing?
Well, first, thanks for having me back, Rob. I didn't know if you would after the last time, so it's a good sign that you actually invited me back. I think crazy shows up in three fundamental areas. The first place it shows up is in the chaos and demand that the world tends to swirl around us. You know, we are constantly being buzzed and dinged and vibrated and tapped and all the things that claw for our attention. And so it can make our brain go on overwhelm, a little bit like a circuit getting overwhelmed. So I think that's the first place it shows up. I think the other place it shows up is largely self-imposed, which is the extent to which we build a world around ourselves that is all about what we're doing and how much we're accomplishing and how fast we're moving. And then I think the third place it shows up is on our personal power bank. Like, where do we hand off our power? Do we hand it off to circumstances, other people, our job, the expectations of the world around us? You know, we're more and more being encouraged to bifurcate or distribute ourselves into categories as opposed to into communities. And I think those are the three places probably where it shows up the most.
Is the world actually crazier today, or are we just exposed to it in a more in-our-face way?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because a lot of people say, well, the world's crazier than ever. The fact of the matter is, if you look at the arc of history, things are actually getting better. Healthcare, right? Diseases are getting cured. Some parts of our education system are helping more depending on your perspective. But what is not getting better is our exposure to all of the stimulation, all of the things coming at us all the time. It used to be when your parents were young and my parents were young, it used to be that you hung your lab coat up at the office, you got in the car, you went home, you had dinner with the family, and you kind of hung out. There were 3 TV stations. There was no scrolling. There was no phones. And so I think now the demand on us, the things tapping on our shoulder all the time, is more prevalent, is more in our face than it's ever been.
So do you distinguish between a genuinely more difficult environment, or is it just the inability to deal with these uncertainties that you're talking about?
I think the challenge is that at scale, at speed, which is the way the world works now, things come at us faster. So if I pitch you an underhand softball, you can hit it. But if I put you on a pitching machine and fire fastball after fastball after fastball at you, after a while, you're just going to give up, or you're going to be like, things are coming at me so fast, I can't stay on top of it. So I think it's pace and pressure. The pace of things and the pressure of things is greater. And I also think there is an increasing divide or expectation around what we should have to validate ourselves. It's much more complex in the world now to say, oh, look, I'm a productive member. I feel good about myself. I feel good about the world that I live in.
It's very interesting. Pace, pressure, and need for validation, or a desire for validation. It's an interesting framework. I wonder, is some of this just the fact that people spend enormous amounts of emotional energy trying to control these things, trying to influence the pace, the pressure, and the need for acceptance in their world? And ultimately, it's not crazy.
Right.
It's just a lot.
Yeah. You ask the average person out there, they'll say, I go, how you doing? Man, it's crazy. And I'm like, okay. The thing to think about, though, is the work is about moving through it, not overcoming it, not eliminating it, because it's not going to go away. And I think what creates some of the crazy is that we keep trying to bottle it up. It's like shoving the Jack in the Box back in the can and shutting the lid. Instead of understanding, here are the circumstances I'm in, how do I move through that in a way that allows me to have an anchor in the midst of all of it? And if you ask me to sum it up most specifically, I would say that people lack an anchor. They're largely adrift, largely being tossed around by the environment that they're in, or the expectations that they experience, or the pressure they feel from peers, or whatever that happens to be.
It's so interesting you go there. It was brilliant. I'm going to ask you what that is in a minute, but let me give you some context, because let's use real estate and the real estate business as the perfect example of something that maybe what I heard you say is we cannot control things in our lives. And we can't control interest rates, inventory, consumer confidence, the economic drivers of the market. What do you say? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that are out of our control there. And you hear it, people say, Mike, the market is crazy. What is the anchor in that type of environment?
There are three things. First thing is control what is in front of you and what you can actually control. The second thing is to have what we call boundaries, really solid yeses and nos. A boundary is simply a demarcation of where one thing starts and another thing stops. And often in real estate, boundaries are porous at best. I was talking to somebody the other day. They answered a call at 10:30 at night after they had already gone to bed because they were sure a deal was falling apart. And maybe the deal was falling apart, but at 10:30 at night, is there really a whole lot we can do? And it wasn't, when we unpacked it, it wasn't really that there was concern that the deal was falling apart. It's what might happen if I don't address the ringing phone, if I don't do it. It's this anxious sort of, I might lose, I might lose, I might lose. And that is a very difficult thing. So I think the anchor is controlling the things you can control, having really good boundaries. And then the final thing is, are you rooted in a sense of what's important to you, of what your core values are? For me, my core values are authenticity, freedom, excellence, and compassion. And I know that when I do things, that's the anchor. So when things are turbulent, when things are churning, I've got to show up my most authentic self. I've got to create an environment where I feel the most free, where I'm doing my best work and living, and where I'm expressing compassion for those around me. Because here's what we need, Rob. We need filters. And how do I determine what behaviors I'm going to engage in? By having filters. And I think those values are really important filters.
I usually take notes when we're recording these, and I just had to flip a page. So there's a whole page of notes right there for everybody. I think the thing that you said that hit home most to me is the idea that anxiety probably comes from the things we cannot control. And if we go down that road, how much of that comes from focusing on outcomes instead of the behaviors that feels like we can control?
Yeah, that's a great question. And here, let me give you the conceptual framework around anxiety. Anxiety is always a prediction. It's a predictive emotion. It's one of the few, by the way, that is predictive. Anger usually comes from right now. Depression, right now. Happiness, right now. But anxiety comes from right then. So anxiety is, I'm looking at a circumstance and anticipating a negative outcome. So when I anticipate, it's either negative or it's dangerous. And if I anticipate negative or dangerous, I'm going to react in the moment, not as if it might happen, but as if it is actually happening. So if I have anxiety, this deal's going to fall apart. We're in the middle right now of trying to negotiate a deal on some land. And wouldn't it be just like one of us in the real estate business to find a listing agent that ghosted us? We made an offer and ghosted us. I mean, we were so horrified. Did you, you wouldn't even return our calls? You wouldn't even send us a text? You wouldn't even let us know what happened with the offer? Now, admittedly, the offer was a little low, I'm sure, for the seller's perspective, but the anxiety of why they didn't get back to us, if there was any, was what will happen if we don't get it? That was a piece of land we really wanted. So what I would say to your listeners is that if you are fully in the present and dealing with what you have to deal with while building the plan or building the pathway to what's coming, that's much better. But the brain has a default mechanism to say something's about to happen and I don't think it's going to be good. And that's where anxiety starts.
And when you talk about crazy, the broad spectrum crazy, which is not a psychological thing. This is more of a modern descriptor.
That's right.
When business slows down and people abandon these fundamentals and start to focus on things that they can't control and they start looking for new things, why do you feel those are the moments when crazy rears its head as opposed to the moments where we're maxed out, things are going well? It just is predictable and we've all felt it recently. I want you to tell me where you think that began and why that is.
I think, first of all, we're in a transaction-based environment. We're all in the sales environment. So all of us carry with us some level of transaction anxiety. We're only as good as our next deal, our next listing appointment, our next sign in a yard, what's going to happen next. So I think, first of all, there's this deprivation, transactional fear that I am one step away from not having a deal. Right. And if I'm one step away from not having a deal, that means I'm one step away from financial stress. I actually think that the crazy happens on both ends of the continuum. When I'm still and business slows down, what we usually do is contract and don't exercise on the things we know we need to do. Right. We don't exercise on the fundamentals. So our brain starts spinning us in circles. What am I going to do? And it's a little bit like when I learned to ride a motorcycle and we were riding really slow. And we were doing a cone weave and people were dropping their bikes right and left. And the instructor said something fascinating is the reason you're dropping your bike is you're not doing the things that you were taught to do so that your bike doesn't fall down. Same thing in real estate. If we don't do the things that will keep momentum moving, then we create trouble. Now, let's say we're at warp factor 6. I mean, things are going nuts. We're busy. We've got 20 listings. We've got a team, or we've got this, or we've got that. Why does that feel so crazy and chaotic? Here's why. Because there's a lack of focus and a lack of modulation. Modulation means all of us need to take the dimmer switch and turn it up or down, when most of the time we just have it turned full on when we're busy, right? You and I had a conversation earlier today about how uncomfortable it feels when we are in a situation where we're traveling all over the country and putting deals together. We're like, oh man, I'm tired. So the crazy isn't specific to the pace. The crazy is specific to the anchor and the focus. That's where the real power is.
That makes perfect sense. So there's a lot stored in your mind about dealing with crazy. And it just so happens that Mike Staver decided it was time to write a book on this exact subject. So some of the reason that we're here is because a book from you landed in my mailbox, and you've done a remarkable job putting together not just the problem, but a solution to the problem. Yeah. And what we just laid out is the problem. And it's a problem everybody probably acknowledges exists.
Yeah.
So what do we do about it? I mean, what happens when our decision-making is operating out of the fear and the scarcity of not being in control? What can we do to make better decisions and show up in a better way amidst crazy?
Yeah. So first thing we do is we slow down. We just gear it down one notch. Today I was talking to the head of an organization who was like, Mike, I don't know if I want to do this. And it's an engineering firm. And I don't know if I want to do this or that or which way. And there was this pace to them when they were talking to me. I felt like they were a record on high speed. For those of you young ones listening, there used to be a time you could modulate the speed. In fact, I didn't know this, but if you're watching a Facebook video or a YouTube video and you press on the screen, it'll speed up who knew? I learned something every day. So the first thing is slow down. The second thing is to have filters, what we talked about a little while ago. Like, what is most important to me at this moment? I was coaching an agent, very successful agent out of California, and we were talking about navigating her own sense of crazy. She was at the Four Seasons. She had a great year. Her family's at the Four Seasons in Maui. And she was sitting on the veranda of her balcony at the Four Seasons, looking at the ocean, watching her kids and her husband in the ocean, playing with a Frisbee. And she said, I'm at the Four Seasons. I might as well be at a Motel 6. And she said, why did I do that? I said, because your brain thinks that unless I'm moving fast, nothing's going to happen. So number one, geared out. Number two, go back to what we talked about relative to your values. The anchor is your values. And then thirdly, to say, what do I need to do right now to give my brain space to process what's happening in front of me? One of the things I say in the book is, never let me hear you say again, I didn't have a choice. Everybody has a choice. We may not like the outcome. We may not like the consequences of the choice, but you always have a choice. Unless you're in jail and then you have a choice too. You can be a ruckus. You can create a lot of problems. So what choice could I make in the middle of this that would interrupt the pattern of the chaos? Now let's think for a minute about the person who's not in a chaotic situation, but they're laying in bed at 3 a.m. going, this isn't really what the brochure promised. Like, I got the right spouse or significant other, got kids, I've got a house, got 2 cars in the garage. Things are great. Why do I feel this sort of listlessness? It's because we're allowing outside things to fill us up instead of understanding what matters most to us. And that's the ultimate thing to think about. More practically, what we can do is we can carve out time every day, usually in the morning, where we sit down and go, what do I want to accomplish today? Not what do I want to do today? People who focus on accomplishments over task always thrive more. So those are a couple of things I think people can use.
More than a couple. That's an entire framework.
Yeah.
How can somebody acknowledge that things are really, really difficult and that we don't operate in the vacuum? So you laid out a framework for how to make this decision, but it's almost impossible to draw on that in the moment.
Yeah.
What is an anchor that can be everything you said? You got to gear down. You got to anchor to your values, right? How can you do that in the moment? Because in this environment, in this podcast, as we're driving to the office in a calm place because we came to the Ninja Selling Podcast to recharge our emotional batteries, it's pretty easy. What about in the moment?
I say in the moment, and this is going to sound so basic and so fundamental, but I cannot tell you how many people do it. I always coach my folks to say, just pause. When you feel the physiology, which will generally show up first, you're talking faster, you're moving faster, your pace is changing, you're got one phone here and one phone there. The best thing you could do at that moment is stop and just count. Just give yourself a 2 or 3 count. On a more macro level, I schedule time most days. I put about 30 minutes of stillness. No phone, no computer, no radio, no thinking, just breathing and being still so that we allow our neurology to Then the final thing that I think is a really important thing is to ask yourself the question, do I feel fully capable at this moment of dealing with whatever comes next? If the answer is yes, then go ahead and deal with it. But if the answer is I'm not sure, that's your opportunity to step back and say, I'm going to take a time out. I'm going to give myself one. We give our kids those. We should give ourselves one as well.
The question that comes up for me, Mike, is how much of what people call crazy is actually a decision or series of decisions that haven't been made?
I think that's brilliant. And I think that's absolutely what it is. It's decisions that have been made that have led us to this point. So there's certain yeses or nos we haven't made yet. And there are decisions that we did make previously that have led us to this place. But here's the good news. Every day you get an opportunity that you wake up, you get an opportunity to make a new decision. You get an opportunity to make a new choice, an opportunity to set a new boundary. One of the things that we say is this, and one of the premises in the book is accepting your current circumstances is the key to being successful. If you do not accept your circumstances, if you do not have a rigorous commitment to what is real, you're going to operate in an illusion of the way things are. This happens in relationships. This happens all over the place. Now, here's the distinction. Acceptance is not approval. Just because you accept it doesn't mean you like it. And we say that the origin of crazy is wrestling with what is real when you're living like what is real isn't. And that's the origin of all the turmoil, of all the things that happen. The beginning of all struggle is the misalignment with expectations and reality. And when you get your expectations out of sync with what's true, you start pretending that reality is a certain way, and that pretending accelerates crazy.
So for the last couple of years, we've worked together, and you've often put me on the spot. And I think it's only fair that I do that to you here.
I think that's
in front of
fair.
this audience.
Fortunately, it won't embarrass me much.
What are you personally still bad at when it comes to navigating crazy? You're the expert in this.
Yeah.
But where is that one spot?
I am bad at saying no when somebody asks me for help. I did a podcast this morning, and he said, "Where are you in your life's journey?" And I said, I am not particularly good when a person says, "I need your help," of me saying, "I wish I could. You're probably going to need to go to this person." There was an old song back in the 50s, and I'm not sure what it's called, but the opening verse is, "If I can help somebody as I travel along, then my living will not be in vain." And that's my theme. And so the devil and the angel is helping people is my purpose. That's what I'm on earth to do. But what happens when the helping hurts? Because you heard me say one of my values is freedom. So at some point, you bolt enough of your purpose onto something that it buckles your values. And so I'm still figuring that path out.
Yeah, that's probably a lifelong journey.
Yeah, for sure.
So you can buy the book on Amazon. Have you recorded an audiobook?
I am in the middle of doing that now. In fact, I'm going to the studio next week to finish it.
Okay, so you'll have the audiobook available if you like Mike's sweet voice. Check it out, Navigating Crazy by Mike Staver. Now, when you're on this journey of growth, the statement that folks make is if you can get one thing and add it to your quiver, it's worth it. So if there's one thing and only one thing that somebody remembers from Navigating Crazy 6 months after they read it, what do you hope that it is?
That it isn't going away and that you're capable of navigating it if you filter everything through what matters most to you and stay consistent with that.
Yeah. And it all starts with figuring out what matters most, which is something all of us have room for improvement in revisiting that on the regular. So Mike Staver, you know that I appreciate you. Thank you for being here. If there's anything that you'd like to leave the ninjas with.
I have a friend who almost died of a dissected aorta about 13 years ago. 97% of people who have dissected aortas pass away. And she was an athlete, very successful amateur athlete. And she came through it. And at the end, I went and met her. She lives in Utah. And I asked her, this is about 5 weeks after she was discharged, after she almost died. And I looked at her and I said, "What's the thing?" And I will leave this with your listeners. She said, and I use this every day, "The day before your life changes forever will be just an ordinary day. Don't waste ordinary days."
If you enjoyed this episode, visit us at theninjasellingpodcast.com to learn more about ninja selling classes and coaching to get you started or further your journey on the ninja path.
Thank you for joining us. Now go have an incredible day.